Jeffro from Two Hacks Garage. Well, this is another one of those from the archives video. I'm really big into history, and I also like everything automotive. And when you combine the two, well, I tell you what, guys, that tells a story. Do you know what else tells a story? Logos. When you see things, everything is associated with the brand. There is always a logo, kind of like this t-shirt here, Corky's Hot Dogs, or even this logo here, the Calumet City Water Towers. Very iconic. Why are they iconic? Well, that's where Cope Racing Transmissions is out of. As you can see, here's the original logo. Everything tells a story. Heck, even Two Hacks Garage, they have a logo. Yep, we even have a logo. Everything's got a logo with it, guys. That's how a lot of advertising and marketing played out in the 1960s all the way through today in the automotive world. One of the most famous icons and logos ever, in my opinion, might be a controversial statement, but is STP oil. That iconic sticker probably everyone had at some point in time, either on their bicycle, on their gym locker, on their skateboard, their hot rod, anything, you name it. In fact, if you look at Woodstock from 1969, the band Canned Heat, the lead guitarist actually had an STP sticker on his guitar. You can see it when he's playing. Going back to my era when I was a teenager, a band, Stone Temple Pilots, they even copied that logo, STP. This isn't about that. This is the story behind that sticker and that logo. Probably the most recognized and used sticker and logo in automotive history. That might be controversial, like I said, but that's what I'm going to have to say because we all know that logo. Many people liken the logo to Richard Petty and his iconic number 43 race cars. That dates back to the early 70s, and we'll touch on that later on. However, but did you know the actual story behind that logo and what actually made it famous? It's pretty interesting. In fact, we're going to get into that right now. It kind of involves Studebaker, and it really involves Indy cars. First off, let's get into the history a little bit of STP to get a better understanding when we move forward and talk about that iconic logo and what actually made it famous. STP was founded by Charles Dwight Liggett, Jim Hill, and Robert D. Hart in 1953. They started the company for a whopping $3,000, which today is about $35,000. It started in St. Louis, Missouri, under the name Chemical Compounds. The sole product at the time that was produced was STP oil treatment, which stood for Scientifically Treated Petroleum. In 1961, the company was bought out by Studebaker Packard Company, and they purchased them and briefly advertised them as Studebaker tested products. In fact, I have an original can of STP oil treatment. It is unused, and here's a better picture of it here, and I'll bring it up. And the kind of neat part about this is it goes through and it explains to you what the oil treatment was made for. Prevents metal friction, improves ring seal, quiets noisy hydraulic lifters, extreme strength of film allows lubricants to take more heat and pressure, and prevents oil stop leaks. You got to remember, oil technology of yesteryear was a far, far cry from what we have today. So this stuff was kind of worth its weight in gold. In fact, let me show you this real quick. Neat part here, if you take a look, it actually says STP Division of Studebaker Corporation, Des Plaines, Illinois. The CEO of Studebaker Packard Company that bought STP in 1961, they knew it was going to be a hit product. If I showed you that can just a second ago, it already has that iconic logo on it. That was after they hired a marketing genius, a guy that not only goes back to racing, but his ability to market and advertise products was legendary. So who exactly is that person? Well, that was Andy Granatelli. Andy Granatelli was hired in 1963. He was brought in to boost the product's name, seeing Studebaker Motor Company knew it was going to be a successful product. They just didn't know how to advertise it. Through Andy Granatelli's absolutely creative marketing ideas, he was able to boost this product to 200,000 gas stations and service stations across the country. Those products that were offered at the time were the original STP oil treatment and their newly formed gas treatment. So when was he hired? Like I said, in 1963. However, that logo hadn't come out yet. Yep, that logo came out in 1964, and Andy Granatelli, he is credited for not only creating that logo, but using that logo in motorsports to push that product, which put STP on the map. got them out there in the racing world, and ended up having them sold at over 200,000 service and gas stations. Andy was well known in the automotive world as being a very creative and ingenious businessman, which we're going to touch on that here in a second. But that being said, he also had his roots in racing going back all the way to 1946 in the Indy 500. Andy tried racing for a while, but a crash in 1948 ended his time at the wheel. While being a successful businessman, he also took on promoting races across the country. That was kind of a little bit of the brainchild moving forward on how to promote STP. One of those races he used to promote was actually a roundy-round race that was held at Soldier Field in Chicago, Illinois. So after the 1950s, what did Andy Granatelli do before he got hired on at STP as the CEO in 1963? Well, in the early 1960s, him and his brothers, Vince and Joe, well, they purchased Paxton Products, the supercharger companies. They bought it from McCullough Motor Company, and along that came with those blowers was known for bad efficiency and poor reliability. However, Andy and his brothers, who have been racing since 1946, well, they were able to turn that around, and to prove it, what they were able to do is build a blown 413 and a 1962 Plymouth Fury, and they drove that thing to over 163 miles per hour in the standing mile. That's not too bad considering that car weighed over 4,000 pounds with Andy at the wheel. It's a little inside joke there. I think you know what I mean. Okay, guys, now it's on to the fun part. What happened when Andy Granatelli took over STP as the CEO, and what really made it the most iconic brand, and how did he market it? This is just a brief history of Andy Granatelli's involvement in the motorsports world. As you can tell, he actually has the know-how, the experience, and the brains to propel STP into the limelight. That's why Studebaker decided to hire him. He had such a diverse portfolio of qualities, experience, and you know what, guys? The marketing to really get that company moving. When he designed and released that sticker, the iconic STP logo in 1964, well, the rest was history. You got to remember, guys, back then, you didn't have the internet, you didn't have cell phones, you didn't have 1,000 TV shows across the board on cable. What you had was very basic things. You had 3 channels on TV, maybe 4. You had magazines, newspapers, and the biggest of all, you had fans that packed those seats. Speaking of fans that packed those seats, let's get into some of the marketing that he actually had, and that was a major success. 1964 Indianapolis 500. That's the race many people say that this logo was actually made famous. I'm going to show you some photos over here of examples just how the marketing genius of Andy Granatelli quickly took over that STP name brand. If you look here, suits, jackets, pants, the crew, anybody associated with STP at that race was just over the top, in your face, all those logos everywhere. Branding and marketing pays off. Not only that, they were giving these stickers out like mad. Everybody had them, and next thing you know, that sticker was everywhere. Speaking of the 1964 Indianapolis 500, Bob Unser drove the STP Corporation car at the Indianapolis 500. However, on the second lap, he was involved in a very horrific crash that took 2 lives. He did survive, and he also returned in 1965 at the Indianapolis 500, also in an STP-powered car. But if you can see over here, guys, not only was that STP car beautiful, everything else around it was all around marketing. That really helped start to put them on the map. With that, we're going to go over a couple more notable STP race cars. In 1967, STP sponsored a car that was built by Granatelli Racing. That is kind of ironic, right? Well, this car was actually turbine powered. This car was built in secret and unveiled at the 1967 Indianapolis 500. It utilized a Pratt & Whitney engine and was nicknamed Silent Sam due to how quiet it was during qualifying. The car was driven by a legend, none other than Parnelli Jones himself, and he actually led the first 171 laps of the race. But with about 3.5 laps left, a bearing failed in the transmission and forced him out of the race. That handed the win right over to A.J. Foyt. However, that turbine-powered car that Parnelli piloted for the Indianapolis 500, that STP sponsored, that really shook up the IndyCar world. And you know what, guys? That's not the only car that STP sponsored that was extremely iconic. Andy Granatelli was an absolute genius. Although he barely missed winning the 1967 Indy 500 that turbine car actually completely dominated, he almost got it in 1968 also. However, 1969 saw STP sponsoring yet another car. This time, having barely missed that race in 67 and 68, STP partnered with Mario Andretti. The car's sleek, aerodynamic, flat, low-to-the-ground design was quickly named the Hawk, and it forever changed IndyCar racing due to that styling. It was Ford-powered, and it was absolutely dominant on the track. Mario Andretti, he won that race, went to the winner's circle, and the rest was history. Now, starting with the face that is probably most recognized with STP. Yep, starting in 1972, STP sponsored and formed its most well-known partnership. Yep, that's the famed number 43 in NASCAR, Richard Petty, the King. This partnership still exists today, and Richard Petty and STP won 60 races and 4 Cup titles together. A couple famous races including in that was the 1981 Daytona 500, and with STP, he also won his 200th career race. Many of you guys know all the famous light blue, Petty blue, if you want to call it, Plymouths that ran under that, but he also ran those cars under Pontiac also. Many awesome historic cars were with that team. Probably the most iconic team, longest lasting team ever to be in NASCAR history. Just like Richard Petty being the king, so was marketing. And Andy Granatelli, well, he really nailed it. You can kind of say he was the early guy, king of the marketing when it came to aftermarket performance. I know that might sound weird with STP being an oil treatment and gas treatment, but you know what? When you think about it, we all think of all the cool aftermarket high-performance stuff from back in the day. And the early 1960s, when he formed that partnership with STP, that marketing, that genius know-how really took off and put STP on the map. I tell you what, guys, what's kind of cool about that is that original $3,000 investment back in the early 1950s when STP was formed under its original name was $3,000 or about $35,000 today. However, by 1966, that company grew into a $43 million company extremely quickly. In today's money, well, you know what? That's well over $500 million. Heck, even by 1969, STP was available for trading on the New York Stock Exchange. Cool part about that is every stock exchange, they have a symbol, and that symbol was none other than STP. Let's get in some of the marketing genius that really helped STP become that legend and that iconic logo that we know. Jackets, like this one here. This is an original New Old Stock racing jacket. I have quite a few old ones, but this one, as you can see, is STP. The famous red, white, and blue logo that we all know. Some of the other things that they had besides the decals, well, they even had model cars, they had shirts, they had hats, they even had mechanics suits, and even suits themselves. Obviously, you saw pictures earlier where Andy Granatelli and the Indy 500 teams he had, they all wore those. It was marketing genius. It was absolutely in your face, and you know what? That boldness really paid off. Heck, for people that like the engine race math like us that are kind of nerdy, well, guess what? They even have a pocket protector. They literally had everything. These are just a very few small items. Like I mentioned, there was many, many, many more. You know what, guys? They even got into the world of music. STP had a race car album with Richard Petty, shown here. And they even had a band that actually put together like a 7-inch single. I even have it, and it's right here. Kind of neat. I'm going to read this to you. It is the Delvettes, and they call this, I Call My Baby STP. It's actually pretty neat. At the end of this, we're going to hear what this sounds like. But just like everything else, if you look at that, there's a free STP decal inside. Speaking of free STP decals inside, you know what? Not only did they have advertising in magazines, guess what, guys? They even had free stickers in magazines. This magazine right here, if you look at it, it's got a section in there that had free giveaway decals in there. I happened to find that still had those intact. And if you look at that right there, well, guess what, guys? It shows you how you can fill out an order form for more information on STP products and even get jackets like the one you see here. So That's where I'm going to end this video. The cool part about it is a lot of people associate that iconic brand with Richard Petty, and rightfully so, because that is probably the largest name ever to be associated with STP. However, the guy that made STP truly famous was Andy Granatelli. After Studebaker purchased them and they hired him on as their CEO, well, his marketing genius, his background, and his know-how, that really pushed them into the limelight. Had to do with Indy cars, but in the end, NASCAR ended up making them the name we know. I hope you learned a few things with that. I really like the archive videos. I know it's kind of controversial to say this is probably the most iconic logo and probably the most produced logo, but I'm going to tell you what right now, you can ask anybody from age of 80 years old down to little kids. I guarantee you they're going to tell you one logo that they all know. If you show it to them, they're going to know that's STP.
She's real sharp, that Carmine. She's the hottest little wheels off the line. Well, we're moving down the highway just as fast as can be. My STP, my girl and me. Well, we're burning up the streets and down along the lane. That's why I gave her the name of STP. Yeah, baby, she moves for me. Yeah, baby, she's a ram-inducted Hemi with 4 on the floor. And when I take her out, she's gonna score for me. Everybody watching will truly see. She's the hottest machine anywhere around. You'll never hear anyone put her down. 'Cause she's my STP. Yeah, baby, she moves for me. Yeah, baby, my STP's out ahead of the line. My STP, she can really whine. Whoa, nothing can touch her, nothing comes near. On the road you can see the fear of my STP. Yeah, baby, she moves for me. Yeah, baby. Nothing can touch her, nothing comes near. On the road you can see the fear of my STP. Yeah, baby, she moves for me. Yeah, baby, STP, baby, STP, baby.